Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Big surprise, I just did a Fantastic Four video, and all of a sudden, Marvel reveals a full first look at what Galactus will actually be in the movie. And it's Ralph Ineson, very clearly, because he is voicing the character, but they did a lot of it motion capture, so it is his face that you actually see. Like, you can tell that it's him. There's a lot going on with him in the movie. Obviously, they're just setting him up because it's his first appearance inside the new version of the MCU as we're going forward. A lot of people wondering why they're going straight to Galactus, not saving him for like a later movie. We'll explain that because there's a lot happening with Avengers Doomsday, Avengers Secret Wars, in the soft reboot that the MCU is doing on itself going forward. Absolutely cannot wait for this to come out in theaters and for casual fans to ask people why it looks so weird and for comic book fans to turn to them and say, no, it's supposed to look this weird. This is also why they're using the Shala Ball version of Silver Surfer inside the new Fantastic Four movie instead of going straight to Norrin Radd that actually showed up when Galactus appeared for the first time, which is the story that they're actually adapting for the movie. There's a bunch of stuff going on here, so if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get everything. We still have a couple months to go before the movie comes out. This is why we're just seeing this now, because we still have a couple months to go. Also, I think, as I speculated in my previous video, Marvel wants to ease people into like the super cool, super weird Jack Kirby classic designs. And I think early on when they were deciding to set this during the 1960s, Kevin Feige was trying to lean into those classic super weird Jack Kirby designs. Whereas before, during the Chris Evans era of the Fantastic Four back in the early 2000s, the way they talk about those movies is that at the time, people were just deathly afraid of letting comic book stuff be like the actual comics, all because of what had happened with the Batman franchise between Batman Forever and Batman and Robin with George Clooney Batman. It was really George Clooney Batman that you can blame for a lot of this, because it happened just a couple years prior to Bryan Singer's version of X-Men in 2000, which is basically credited along with the original Blade movie with Wesley Snipes with causing comic book movies to come back into vogue because they leaned into a much more hardcore vibe, much more serious vibes. I already talked about this during some of my X-Men Avengers Doomsday videos too, because a lot of those classic X-Men from those X-Men 2000 movie are coming back in a Doomsday in another universe, and they're going to be way more comic booky because now studios, Kevin Feige most notably, not afraid to lean into the comics. They just made fun of that during Deadpool and Wolverine with him saying, finally after 20 years, he looks like he's not afraid to actually show up in a comic book movie and wear an actual comic book costume.
That only took 20 years.
But I feel like Fantastic Four takes that idea way further and is like way less afraid of being more comic booky than Deadpool and Wolverine was. Zoom and enhance on some of these designs too. Notice how detailed this is. This is actually fantastic to make all the puns as possible. This isn't super resolution, but you can kind of tell. Look, notice his body has all these designs on it, all these etching and lines. This is actually him when he is planet size. Notice it looks like he's got actual cities all over his body, like there are little lights, as if they're like little offices, little rooms all over his body. That is literally how big he is. He can change his size, but when he's at full size, he is literally as big as a planet. He could fit all of New York City in just like a tiny part of his head here. But one of the reasons why he looks like this is because of the way he's actually made. They're trying to be more true to the original comics, even though the original comics had slightly simpler designs just based on the technology that they used for drawing Galactus when Jack Kirby initially created him with Stan Lee. Part of the idea in the movie is they're adapting the Coming of Galactus storyline where he shows up to Earth for the first time, fights the Fantastic Four, and they're able to get him to leave without consuming the Earth. But in the movie, they're actually changing a little bit of the way that goes down. Ultimately, it seems like he's going to be able to destroy the Earth, and the Fantastic Four won't be able to stop him because all the trailer footage just has them constantly saying, "Don't worry, we're going to protect you," and the Silver Surfer showing up saying, "This planet is marked for death, you're screwed." I think the idea is the movie is going to ask the question, what happens if they can't save the Earth? Because the way that Kevin Feige has explained it is that in their alternate universe, they're the only group of heroes on the planet. They're like their world's version of the Avengers. There are no other Avengers characters, and there aren't meant to be like real big Easter egg characters from the MCU that you see that are familiar, that exist during this period either, because there are a lot of characters that we've seen in the MCU that were active during the 1960s, but of the MCU, like Howard Stark, probably one of the best examples.
What's it made of?
Vibranium.
So in the Fantastic Four's universe, no matter what's happened, they just immediately assume that the Fantastic Four will fix whatever's wrong. What happens when an unsolvable problem comes along that they can't fix? A very, very giant, angry problem that's very, very hungry. Looking at the centerpiece around his upper chest here too, it even looks like there's a clock in the middle of his chest. A giant celestial-looking clock. For those of you asking though, like most powerful characters in the MCU they've ever introduced in the movies, Galactus is not the most top tier powerful. Like there's a list of characters who are very close in power levels. Really good example is the Celestials. Like, is Galactus a Celestial in the MCU, or is he going to be more powerful than the Celestials? They've actually addressed this in the comics. The Celestials technically are more powerful than Galactus, and Galactus usually gives them a pretty wide berth. Like, they both have their grand cosmic purposes that they pursue, so they just kind of leave each other's groups to their own devices under most circumstances. Usually when Galactus has fought the Celestials or faced them in the past, something really, really bad has gone down, or it's like a group of evil Celestials. If you're not a big comic book reader, you've probably at least seen people post the images of Franklin Richards making Galactus his herald, like, to me, my Galactus. Probably one of the most iconic Galactus and Franklin Richards scenes in the more recent comics. That's actually from a story where Galactus specifically fought the Celestials, mad Celestials it was, but it was still Celestials with the help of couple versions of Franklin Richards. I do not think they're going to get into this during the new Fantastic Four movie. Like, the whole idea of Fantastic Four First Steps is that it references Franklin Richards taking his first steps in the movie, but also I think Galactus taking his first steps on planet Earth. This sort of gets into the parallel between the characters. I love the way that Marvel is sort of setting the stage for this, but like it's just the beginning of Franklin Richards and the future of the MCU. In that story where Galactus winds up defeating the Mad Celestials, he only did so because Franklin Richards actually merged with a past version of himself to upgrade his own power levels and then resurrected Galactus after the regular version of Galactus was killed by those Mad Celestials. Like, Galactus could probably hold off a single Celestial on his own, but a whole bunch of them ganged up on him. And the same thing happened for Franklin Richards. Like, Franklin Richards tried to solo the Mad Celestials, and he realized at a certain point that he couldn't also do it by himself either, and he needed Galactus's help. So it was basically him teaming up with Galactus, but in order to do that, he had to resurrect Galactus after merging with a past version of himself. That's meant to be a really good indicator for how powerful the Celestials can be. Part of the reason why Galactus is so obsessed with Franklin Richards in the comics, and they might get into this in the movie in a little bit, like there's a lot of theories about why Galactus actually comes to Earth and why he's so preoccupied with Franklin Richards. You can actually see him peeping into the Baxter building in this Comic-Con trailer from a couple years ago. Just on the lookout for baby Franklin Richards, he can detect his power from across the universe. In the comics, Galactus senses how important and powerful Franklin Richards is. The two of them literally watch the heat death of the main Marvel universe and the rebirth of the next version of the universe. It's actually meant to be a bookend for Galactus's entire story arc. So Galactus's origin is that he actually comes from a previous version of the universe, and he was one of the last living beings to actually witness the heat death of that version of the universe. So this sort of gets into celestial mechanics with the cycle of Big Bangs theory. This is actually a real-life theory, so part of the idea is that the universe is slowly expanding, but at a certain point, it will begin contracting. You get to the heat death of the universe, basically like the death of the universe, but it takes many, many billions of years for that to happen. During the heat death of the universe, matter eventually gets so dense that it causes another Big Bang, and basically another version of the universe is born. They got into this during the Ultimates comics in the Marvel Universe, so part of the idea is that I believe it's the 7th or the 8th version of the universe that they're in right now, and the idea is that Galactus comes from the directly previous version of the universe. When he was still just a regular man, he was a scientist called Galen of Ta, so he sensed that the universe was about to die, and he just wanted to be there to witness it. What wound up happening, though, is that the consciousness of the entire version of that multiverse wanted to survive the heat death because it was about to die, and another version of the cosmos was going to be born. It wound up making a bargain with Galactus, so they fused, and it allowed them to survive the next cycle of Big Bangs and the death of their universe. That's why Galactus is so powerful in this new version of the universe, because he's the merged form of the entire consciousness of the previous multiverse. His entire function, his reason for being in the new universe, also exists in concert with the Celestials.
Without us, our universe will fall into darkness.
So if you remember the Eternals movie, remember the Eternals, they introduced the idea that the Celestials were basically like cosmic gardeners, and their whole purpose was to propagate the universe by creating more Celestials. They create more Celestials using the seeds, killing off planets that allow them to create new galaxies, causing the universe to continue expanding. So the minute that the Celestials stop creating new galaxies, the universe slowly begins its heat death, begins contracting, then you get the cycle of Big Bangs again. While the Celestials are out there creating more Celestials, more galaxies, Galactus, the Hungerer, goes around consuming dead or dying worlds. So he kind of acts like a gardener doing a controlled burn on the universe. Here's one of the big ideas in the comics that I think that they're changing for the movies. In the comics, there's a version of Galactus in every single universe, so you have a whole bunch of alternate versions of Galactus out there. In the movies, though, I think they're going to say that Galactus is a multiversal being and there's only one version of Galactus for the entire multiverse. And going forward, when we see Galactus show up again, it'll still be Ralph Ineson playing the character. So this sort of gets into the idea of why his version of Silver Surfer in the movie is the Shala Ball version and not the Norrin Rad version. There'll be a ton of questions about this until after the movie comes out, and I think that everybody just sees it happen on screen. But I think part of the idea is that the Fantastic Four's universe is eventually meant to die in an incursion, so it won't exist anymore. They come to the MCU after the death of their world, and I think Galactus will also follow them after Avengers Secret Wars 2 in this big soft reboot that Marvel is doing. But I think the idea, and the way that they list all the castings in the Fantastic Four movie sort of supports this theory. This Shala Ball version, played by Julia Garner from Ozark, is like really, really far down on the casting list, meaning that she's not a really huge character in the movie, and I think the idea is that she shows up and they do an adaptation of the coming of Galactus, and whatever winds up happening to him destroy this world in this universe is that she also is killed during the events of this movie. She dies during the events of this movie and does not leave that universe. So that when the Fantastic Four come to the MCU, as we saw in the Thunderbolts post-credit scene, Galactus eventually follows them. He shows up at some point during Avengers Secret Wars 2 in the background just because he's such a cool character. You can't leave him out of Secret Wars. We continue to see him in Marvel Phase 7 and beyond, in whatever the new Marvel Universe winds up looking like. And this gives Marvel, Kevin Feige, the ability to cast a brand new MCU version of Norrin Rad, the original version of the Silver Surfer that people have been asking for them to do. So if there are any questions why Silver Surfer is female and not the Norrin Rad version, that's why, because we're not going to see her after this movie, and she's a relatively minor character in this movie. My assumption is now there's been an official look at Galactus that's dropped online, that Marvel will just put his face in the next trailer so you actually see him, maybe even hear him speaking in one of the final trailers, but they're probably saving him for like the last real big trailer. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below. What do you think about this look for Galactus? Personally, I think it looks solid given what we've seen from Galactus in live action before. Like, as long as he's not a floaty cloud, I think it's a giant step up. This summer is going to be absolutely wild for movies. We have Fantastic Four, Jurassic World, and the new Superman movie coming out around the same time, so be sure to save some money for all those tickets. Do not worry though, I already have a plan for this. I will start giving away movie tickets for all 3 of the movies when we get a little bit closer to them coming out. There's a bunch of stuff coming up. DC just dropped a couple real big Superman trailers. Click here for both of my videos for that, and click here for my new Avengers Doomsday video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.